Well, welcome, my friends. Welcome to another edition of More Bad News, brought to you, as always, by Camel Cigarettes. Take the Camels Challenge, smoke Camels for 30 days and see for yourself what a difference Camels can make in your life. You know, friends, here at the show, we don't sell hope. We sell camels. We make no bones about the fact that this smoking has all sorts of untoward health effects. At this point in history, the number one cause of death is habitat destruction. The planet is quickly losing habitat upon which all life depends. This show is meant to entertain you as we quickly descend into oblivion. If there ever were a time to take the Camels Challenge, this is it. Really, folks, there is no need to worry about cancer. No one is getting out of this alive. Well, my friends, today is Purim, the Jewish version of Halloween, when the Jews dress up and get themselves as inebriated as possible. The Talmudic advice is to drink until you can no longer distinguish between Trump and Biden or between Haman and Mordecai. Some rabbis explain that this means you should drink until you pass out. I think I mentioned some time ago that I've been forced to give up alcohol. Still, last night, after reading the Megillah, I had a double shot of my favorite Polish vodka. Honestly, giving up alcohol has been difficult. Judaism treats alcohol the way Native Americans treat tobacco. Rather than seeing it as harmful intoxicants, we see it as a part of a sacred tradition. Just as Native Americans sanctify sacred moments with tobacco, we sanctify sacred moments with alcohol. In answer to the question, what is good wine? The Talmud says wine that has the power to intoxicate. The Talmudic wine was more like brandy than the weak stuff we drink today. Despite being deeply attached to alcohol all my life, I had no choice. I had to let it go because even small amounts were making me sick. This is why I recommend taking the Camels Challenge today while you still can. You never know when your body will turn against you. You know, there is an anti-Semitic canard that Jews have horns. The Anti-Defamation League has denounced this canard, saying that it's absolutely absurd. But is it really? I'm a Jew, and I've got horns. I just don't wear them all the time. I only wear them on special occasions like Purim, and when I'm meeting with the elders of Zion in a secret Polish cemetery to plot the takeover of the world. So don't dismiss all the nasty things you've heard about the Jews, especially regarding genocide. The Book of Esther is not history. It was probably written as a farce, meant to be read as part of a raucous Mardi Gras-like celebration. It was probably written between the 4th and 5th centuries BCE, and certainly centuries before Christianity. There is no Persian empire who even remotely resembles Ahasuerus. If there are two things that we knew about the Persian emperors, one is that they would never have taken an orphan of unknown lineage to be the queen of the empire, and two, that they were outstanding in the ancient world for their tolerance of religious diversity. It was under the Persians that the Second Temple was rebuilt. What makes the story astonishing is the fantasy that one man, whose name happens to start with an H, decides to exterminate the Jews and is able to carry out his obsession forward to the brink of success. Yet, yesterday was Shabbos Zohar, the day that we read from Deuteronomy 25:17, where God commands the Israelites, Zohar et asher asah l'chol Amalek, remember what the Amalekites did to you when they attacked you from the rear, killing the weakest among you. God ordered the Israelites to wipe out the memory of the Amalekites. And we read from the book of Samuel, 15:2-34, where Samuel sends King Saul out to exterminate the Amalekites from infant to suckling, including all the livestock. As a famous Hasidic rabbi once told me, even the Amalekite goldfish were evil and had to be destroyed. Nothing could survive. If you're intent on exterminating your enemy, you need to make sure that you get the job done right. If you don't succeed, they'll come right back at you, just as the Jews did after the Shoah. I spent my entire career making life miserable for Nazis, and I managed to give a few of them some indigestion. Whenever I was teaching about racism or Nazis, I presented their ideas as if I were a true believer. I wanted my students to appreciate why people loved Hitler, why they admired Osama bin Laden. And so I used to tell my students that they had to decide whether I was a Jew pretending to be a Nazi or a Nazi pretending to be a Jew. And believe me, there were times when I was so drunk I couldn't tell myself. At any rate, here we are 2,500 years later, having a raucous time celebrating our worst nightmare at a time when calls to exterminate for extermination are growing ever louder. Remember Charlottesville, the Jews will not replace us. Folks, imagine there's no heaven. Above us, only sky, and the fate of the Jews and the Nazis, like the poor souls on the number 18 bus that I passed in Jerusalem one Sunday afternoon, Jews, Christians, Muslims, terrorists, saints, all blown up together. Afterwards, the rabbis and cherry pickers scraping the remains of the bodies into one common coffin to be buried together. Jews this time of year collect money to help Jews who can't afford to pay for the Passover festival, which is coming up in a month. Passover is very expensive. Everything has to be kosher. It also has to be kosher about Passover. So synagogues around the world, I guess, ask their members for ma'ot chitim to help those in the community celebrate the Passover. I think this year would be a very good time to also collect money to help our brethren in Gaza for their iftar meals. Let's show the world that we can have compassion for our enemies. We don't have to destroy them from infant to suckling. No one is going to win this war. My advice is small acts of kindness. I know it's a radical idea, but it seems to me that no one deserves to suffer. There'll be plenty of suffering for everybody. We don't need to make a situation worse. If the Trump supporters' donkey collapses under its load, we're commanded to help. I think it would be helpful to think of our future in terms of months rather than years. We might have 72 months or 96 months, but we definitely are within months of our extinction. And since we find it really unpleasant to contemplate, we like to imagine that we have decades, and in that time, technology will somehow save us. But the truth is that it is the technology that is driving us to our doom. The technological infrastructure which supports this show and our existence is extremely fragile and on the verge of collapse. One way or another, the technological systems that support civilization are going to fail us. If, instead of looking at the suffering in Gaza, you broaden your focus and look at the suffering of living things on this planet, you will find that there is a rising tide of suffering everywhere. The fundamental reality is that our habitat capable of supporting life is disappearing from this planet, and with it, life itself is disappearing. The fundamental question that we face today is how to deal with our inevitable extinction without falling into despair, paralyzed by our approaching death. But this has always been the challenge of human consciousness. We all die, and the ancient Israelites believed that death was the end of human existence. The idea that of life after death was introduced to the West by the Greeks, most prominently by Socrates, who believed that the soul had an essence that lived on after death. So let's not play the despair card. No one comes out of this alive. That doesn't mean that we can't get drunk and celebrate the Mardi Gras. Life goes on until it doesn't. So if you're still with me, take the Camels Challenge today and tune in next week for another edition of More Bad News.